She never touched grass, never felt water on her skin. For 7 long years, this orangutan lived trapped in complete, devastating silence. Until one ordinary afternoon, a wild river otter climbed a fence, grabbed her wrist, and pushed her straight into a pond. What happened next has absolutely no precedent in scientific literature anywhere. A bond between two species that should be biologically impossible. This story begins at the Nyaru Menteng Rehabilitation Center, hidden deep inside the vast ancient rainforests of central Borneo, Indonesia. Hundreds of orphaned orangutans live here, rescued from illegal pet traders, deforestation, and the relentless cruelty of human greed and indifference. Among them was a 7-year-old female named Sari, confiscated from an illegal pet trade operation when she was barely an infant. For her first 5 years of life, Sari sat alone inside a tiny dark metal cage with no companionship whatsoever. Then she was moved to a concrete enclosure for 2 more years, still completely alone, still staring at empty walls and corners. By the time Sari finally arrived at the sanctuary, something essential deep inside her young mind had already completely shut down. She would sit in a corner every single day, rocking back and forth, staring blankly at the bare ground beneath her. The sanctuary staff recognized these signs immediately. Severe psychological damage, the kind that years of cruel isolation permanently carves into a mind. Orangutans are the most solitary of all great apes, but even they are never meant to be entirely alone like this. In the wild, infant orangutans stay with their mothers for 7 to 8 full years, learning everything simply by observing her. Sari had never watched anyone. She had no model for play, no template for trust, no concept of connection whatsoever. The enrichment team tried puzzle feeders, platform swings, new climbing structures, and every single behavioral tool in their professional toolkit. They placed other young orangutans in adjacent enclosures right beside hers, hoping proximity alone might spark some kind of social response. Sari refused everything. She would not play, would not eat with others, would not even stand up unless she was physically forced. Her lead primatologist wrote a devastating assessment in her file. Severe psychological atrophy. Prognosis, uncertain. Recovery outlook, extremely poor for her. The staff began to quietly accept that Sari might never recover, that she might spend her whole remaining life rocking in silence. Months passed with absolutely no improvement. The rocking continued endlessly. The blank stare persisted. Hope was slowly draining from her caretakers. Then one afternoon, something completely unexpected happened at the very edge of her empty, quiet world. Something nobody could have predicted. A small, sleek, wild river otter climbed the chain-link fence surrounding Sari's outdoor enclosure and dropped silently down onto a branch inside. The staff knew this particular otter well. She was a resident of the sanctuary pond, coming and going freely for several years. But she had never once entered an orangutan enclosure before. Nobody understood why she chose this particular day, or this particular ape. She landed on a low branch, then hopped down onto the grass, positioning herself maybe 20 feet from where Sari sat rocking. The otter moved closer with curious, fearless energy, sniffing the air. Her dark, intelligent eyes locked directly on the motionless, large orangutan. She reached Sari's hands and sniffed her large knuckles gently, then let out a soft, high-pitched chittering sound, like a greeting. Sari did not react at all. She continued rocking, her eyes fixed on the ground, showing no sign she registered another creature. The otter was clearly not discouraged. She spotted a rubber ball near the enrichment shelf and grabbed it with her small, agile paws. She nudged the ball deliberately across the ground toward Sari until it rolled gently and stopped against the orangutan's completely motionless foot. Sari looked down at the ball. Her dark eyes tracked it for one brief moment, but she did absolutely nothing in response. The otter retrieved the ball again, and this time dropped it directly into Sari's open palm with unmistakable, deliberate, careful intention. Then, in a moment no one watching from above could have possibly anticipated, the otter grabbed Sari's thick wrist and pulled firmly. A keeper watching from the observation deck above said that Sari's facial expression shifted at that exact precise moment. Not surprise exactly. It was something closer to recognition, like a distant, buried memory surfacing. A faint recollection that touch once meant something important. Sari stood up. She had not stood on her own willingly in many months. The keeper watching above held her breath completely. The otter did not release her grip, holding Sari's thick wrist gently between her teeth, the way otters carefully carry their own pups. She led the massive orangutan forward step by careful step across the enclosure, through a gate that a keeper had left slightly open, past the climbing structure, past the feeding platform, through the tall green grass that Sari's bare feet had never once touched before. The otter guided her all the way across the sanctuary grounds to the soft, muddy edge of the large central pond. and then without any warning or hesitation at all, the small otter released her grip and shoved the orangutan straight into the water. Sari went completely under the dark water. Then she broke the surface, coughing, spluttering, and shaking her large heavy head in shock. The keeper, recording from the deck above, nearly dropped his camera in shock. Then he heard a sound never before heard from Sari. She laughed, not a human laugh, a great ape play vocalization, open-mouthed and breathy, unmistakable in its pure, unexpected raw joy. It was the very first positive sound she had produced in all her months at the sanctuary since the day she arrived. The otter dove into the water after her, sleek body cutting through the pond like a torpedo, and surfaced holding the rubber ball. She dropped the dripping ball directly in front of Sari's face and waited there, treading water calmly with those dark, expectant, intelligent eyes. Sari grabbed the ball with her massive hand. She threw it hard. It arced through the air and bounced right off the otter's head. The otter chittered loudly with what seemed like delight, retrieved the ball swiftly from the water, spun around, and threw it right back. For 23 uninterrupted minutes, they played together in that muddy pond while the keeper above never once stopped recording the miraculous scene. Sari chased the otter through the water, dove after her, dunked her completely beneath the surface, and was dunked right back in return. She climbed out onto the muddy bank, panting heavily. Wet grass stuck to her soaked fur, then immediately jumped right back in again. Mud caked between her toes for the very first time in her life. Water dripped from her long, red fur like a rebirth. She did not sit back down for the rest of that entire day. The lonely corner where she always rocked stayed completely empty. The sanctuary staff gave the brave little otter a name that very afternoon, Kecil, meaning little one, in the Indonesian language. No one had trained Kecil to do any of this remarkable thing. No one asked her or guided her toward that enclosure. A completely wild animal crossed a fence on her own free will, entered an alien world, and reached a soul no human could. She used nothing more than a rubber ball and one fearless shove into cold water to unlock what years of therapy never could. Primatologists confirm that a genuine friendship between a great ape and a mustelid has absolutely no recorded precedent anywhere in scientific history. Not in captivity, not in the wild. No evolutionary reason for it. No shared language between them. No mutual survival benefit at all. And yet it happened anyway, defying every textbook and every existing theory about how animals form social bonds across the species barrier. 3 months after that first extraordinary encounter, Sari was eating meals alongside other orangutans for the very first time in her entire life. She was climbing trees now with growing confidence, swinging between platforms with strength and coordination no one had ever believed she could develop. She began greeting human visitors at the observation window with a calm and genuinely curious gaze, showing absolutely no fear or withdrawal anymore. Her keepers stopped writing negative updates in her rehabilitation file because there was simply nothing concerning left to report about her condition. The transformation was so complete and so total that the primatologists could barely reconcile their own earlier notes with the ape before them. And Kecil still comes. Every single afternoon, without fail, she appears at the perimeter fence at almost exactly 2 o'clock, like clockwork. She slips through a familiar gap in the worn chain links and makes her steady, unhurried way down the path toward the central pond. If Sari is already waiting at the water's edge, the two of them immediately begin playing, chasing, splashing, and wrestling together joyfully. If Sari is still inside her sleeping enclosure, Kecil waits patiently by the water, perfectly still, until her friend finally comes outside to join. Sometimes the otter brings a small gift, a leaf, a smooth pebble, or a tiny stick she found somewhere along her hidden path. Sometimes she simply sits on a warm, flat rock and lets Sari carefully groom her thick brown fur with those massive, gentle orange hands. The scientists still cannot fully explain why this extraordinary bond exists. It breaks every model they have for understanding animal social behavior. There is no instinctive template for this relationship, no genetic code anywhere that instructs a wild otter to befriend a broken captive ape. And yet every single afternoon, without exception, a wild otter climbs a fence to play with an orangutan who forgot how to live. Sari touches grass now. She wades into the pond completely on her own. She watches the fence carefully each day, around 2 o'clock. Somewhere beyond those trees, through hidden paths that only she knows, Kecil is already making her way toward the sanctuary right now. Scientists are now asking a question nobody had ever thought to ask before. What truly heals a mind that has been shattered? Perhaps the answer was never medicine, never therapy, never enrichment tools. Perhaps it was always something far simpler and more mysterious than that. Perhaps all it ever truly took was one small creature brave enough to climb a fence and stubborn enough to never let go. Love breaks all rules. Follow for more wild, heartfelt moments.